All right, so the next unit that we're going to look at doing some review on is the functions and inverses unit, which we did not too long ago. Actually, that's one of our more recent units. So one thing that is kind of nice about this, I don't know if you guys remember, but when we find inverses, the very first step that we always did when we found inverses is we would always trade the X and the Y. We would always trade X and Y. Quentin, you got to take that phone, put it away. Get your Chromebook out. Chromebooks should be out. Phones should be away. Earbuds should be away. So when you find inverses, you always trade the X and Y. That was always the first step. And then everything after that was just trying to get the Y alone, trying to get the equation to look right. And the nice thing for us is that Desmos does not care if the equation looks right. Desmos only cares if you traded the X and Y. And if you guys remember, once you found an inverse, it had that final notation where it says -1. That's how it tells you that it's an inverse. So the cool thing about these is that we're going to trade the X and Y, and then with Desmos, we're actually going to be done with the whole problem. So if we didn't use Desmos, we couldn't do that, but with Desmos, that's what we can do. So here it tells you that the inverse is this, and it wants you to find what the original function was. So all you're going to have to do is trade X and Y, and then we're going to graph the problem, graph the answers, and see which ones match up. So if this is the inverse, and we know that this is in the Y position, that's in the Y position of the inverse, these are in the Y position of the original function. If this is the inverse, then we know that to get back to the original function, we just have to take, you still got your phone out? I'm just waiting on you, Quinn. You want to open up your Chromebook? All you got to do is trade that X and Y back to where it should have been in the original function to begin with. So we're going to take this, we're going to trade X equals -3/4 Y plus 2. And then this is going to match up with one of these original functions. So I'm going to graph this, and then I'm going to graph all of these and see which one is identical. So graph X equals -3/4 Y plus 2. Okay, so there's our graph. And then I'm going to go through and graph each of my answer choices and see which one matches up. So 4/3 X minus 8/3. That one does not match. Y equals -4/3 X plus 8/3. And that one does match. So number 2 is the original problem. Eddie, earbuds out, Chromebook out. All right, so these are things that we're going to do for every single one of these. It says, here's the original function, find the inverse. So all you have to do to find the inverse is just trade the X and Y. So here's the original function, there's the Y. To find the inverse, all we have to do is trade the X and Y. So X equals 3Y plus 1. So you would graph that, and then you would graph all of these and see which one matches up. The next one, here it is. There's the Y. Here's our Y's. Okay, it says here's the original function. These all have -1s, so these are all inverses. Take the original function, trade the X and the Y. Graph this, graph the answers, see which one matches. That's all you got to do with your inverses. You don't have to do any work. Okay. Let's turn the page. I just want to see if there's anything else that might be a little weird in here. If we have the point, we're looking at number 9. If we have the point -5, 3, and we trade the X and Y, what is our new point? If we have the point -5, 3, and we trade our X and Y, what's our new point? 3, -5. So which one's the answer? C. Okay. Okay, I want to show you a good strategy for a problem like number 11, because I think this is cool. And you guys might have ended up doing something like this on Desmos, because you guys do know how to use Desmos pretty well, but we're going to go ahead and do it anyway. So number 11 talks about a function f of x, and it talks about a function g of x, and then it asks us to do things with those functions. So here, what is it asking us to do for A? It says f plus g, and then it has a 1 right next to it. So what is it asking us to do? It's asking us to add them together. And then what does the 1 mean? No, because normally we don't just take the f and add it with the g. We don't really see this written this way, do we? What do we normally see written? It'd be f of x, right? It would have a parentheses next to it. Okay, so the normal way for this to be written is we would see f of x plus g of x. They would tell us add those two things together. But this doesn't say of x. It says of 1. So if we change these and we do of 1 and of 1, of 1, of 1, they're telling us to add them together, but what are they asking us to do with them? They're asking us to add the f of x and the g of x together, but what are they asking us to do with them? Do they want us to take this and add it to this? Or do they want us to do something with the 1? And then look at your answer choices. Your answer choices are numbers. How did they get numbers for answer choices? Any ideas? So they're asking us to take f of x and take g of x and add them together, but they're asking us to plug in 1 when we do it. So add f and g, add them together, but don't leave the x there, plug in 1 instead of x. That's what they're asking us to do. Here, they're asking us to subtract them, take the f minus the g, but don't leave it like that. Don't just have x's there. Plug in -2 for x when you do the problem. Here, they're asking us to multiply, take the f and the g and multiply them together. But when you do it, don't leave the x, plug in 0 where the x is. Here, divide them, do f of x divided by g of x, but when you do it, don't leave the x there, plug a 2 in. Does that make sense? They're asking you to plug numbers in. Okay, so we're going to let the calculator, we're going to let Desmos do this for us. So before I let Desmos do it for us, I have to tell Desmos what the different names are for the functions. So I'm going to tell Desmos that we have 2 functions. One is named f of x, and f of x is x squared minus 1. The other one is g of x, and g of x is 5x squared plus 2. And then from there, we can tell the graph to do the different things for us. So we can say, all right, I want the graph to add them together. So I'm going to tell the graph to do f of x plus g of x. And then here's the cool thing. I don't really need the graphs of any of these, but here's the cool thing is we can take this and we can make it graph a table, because if you guys remember, the table is where it's really easy to plug numbers in. Do you guys remember doing that when we did the last unit? We could like plug in 5, we could plug in -2, we could plug in 2.7, we could plug in anything we wanted if we had the table. So I'm going to go up here and click on the gear, and I'm going to click on the table. And now I have a table where it's adding F and G together. And if I plug in 1, the answer that I get when I plug in 1 is 7. So when I'm adding F plus G, when I add them together and I plug in 1, the answer I get is 7. Okay, and then I can go and I can take my table, and for the next one, I'm going to change it to a minus, and I'm going to plug in -2. So let me take my table. I'm going to go back here, f of x minus g. I changed it to a minus, and now I'm going to plug in -2. When I plug in -2, my answer is -19. Okay. Next, I'm going to change it to multiplication, f of x times g of x. And they use the little star that's above the 8 key. So I'm going to do shift 8 to change that to multiply. And they want me to plug in 0. If I plug in 0, I get -2. So I'm not doing any of this math myself. I'm just letting Desmos do it for me. And then over here, Desmos doesn't do division very well. Like I'm probably gonna have to retype this. I could hit the division key, which is the question mark key on my keyboard. Yeah, but it's gonna make me retype part of it. So I'm just gonna delete that. Maybe delete this. Now hit division. There we go. G of x. Okay. F of x divided by g of x. And I'll look at 2. Now this one I'm going to have to do a little bit more work because it gave me the answer as a decimal, and all the answer choices on the problem are just fractions. Eddie, do you have your Chromebook today? So we need to get it out because we're using them today. So let's look at all of these fractions and see which fraction matches the decimal. So we need 0.1363636. So it's not 5/22, 3/22. Yeah, it looks like it matches 3/22. So D is the last one. So there's how we could use Desmos to do that problem for us. It just saves us a little bit of time. We didn't have to use our brains as much. So we could use the table to answer all those questions pretty quickly. Okay. We've got these piecewise functions. Do you guys remember how to plug in the piecewise functions? We got to, yeah, and not just not a normal bracket. What kind of bracket? The squiggly ones, right? So this one we would want to type in as x plus 5 to the third. We would want to make it look like that. But then we're not going to type in a comma. We're going to type in a squiggly bracket. That's how you type them in on Desmos. Squiggly bracket. That's the key that's right next to the P on your keyboard. That's where the squiggly bracket is. You're going to hit shift and then the key right next to the P on your keyboard. And then x less than or equal to if you're typing it in with the keyboard, or you can use the keyboard button on Desmos and just find the key that looks like that, -4. So this is how you would type that first line. Okay, so we can do those ones. How do we know if the circle should be not filled in or filled in? Do you guys remember? Yeah. Yeah. So how do we tell? Yeah. So this one says less than or equal to. So should the circle be open or should it be filled in? Circle filled in. Okay, circle filled in. Okay. So we call that a closed circle. The circle should be closed on that one. Okay. So for this one, there's no line. So this should be an open circle. This one has a line. So the circle should be filled in. Okay. All right. I think that's as much information as you guys are going to need to be able to do this packet. So I'm going to leave you to it so you guys can use Desmos to practice. Let me know if you have questions. If you're still working on the first packet and you have questions on that one, that's fine as well. Just try to get that first packet turned in this period so I can give you credit for it. All right. Also, just as a reminder, grades have to be in the computer and finalized by Wednesday. So if you are missing a quiz, missing a test, something like that, you need to come in like today during third period or tomorrow during third period to make those up. Otherwise, you're not going to get those in the grade book. All right. Okay.